talk a little bit about Estonia, the Baltic countries, but mainly, of course, Estonia, since I've been elected here. Though I understand I'm more popular in Latvia these days. Anyway, it's been 22 years since Estonia became independent again after 50 years of occupation. And frankly, I think it's one of the greatest success stories in the world, because 22 years ago we were a backward, dusty, dingy, unknown place that had been basically just steamrollered by the Soviets, so that people didn't even realize this country existed anymore. At least when I grew up, no one believed Estonia existed, because there was only a map of the Soviet Union. And I said, if you're Polish and you fled communism, it was, where are you from? You say Poland, you look on the map, and it said there's Poland, even if it's a communist country. You say, where's Estonia? You look at the map and say, no, that's Russia. So that was where we were, and things were rather bad, and of course, very, very poor. But at the same time, we knew that before the war, before World War II, there's so many wars since then, but anyway, before World War II, Estonia and Finland were more or less at the same level, so this was kind of this motivational time that we got to get back there. But the challenges were rather great, and the idea of leapfrogging or getting over 50 years of backwardness was quite daunting. In order to get there, we did a lot, all kinds of things. Most important, of course, were the economic reforms that liberated people's energies to do business, start businesses. And I'm sure someone here will talk about those things because they are important. The legal basis of a society and a business-friendly environment is crucial to success if you're a business person. But I'll talk a little more about what we did to make Estonia one of the most modern countries in the world, where I've been calling this country for years Estonia, because it is probably, less and less even probably, I would argue it is the most interneted country in the world. Maybe some countries have more computers per capita, but in terms of services and goods available on through the internet, there is no country that has come as far as we have. And now even countries such as the UK come to us to see how to do things online. Just February, the UN rated us the business system here online. The annual report, which enables entrepreneurs to submit annual reports via our central registry and the internet, as the best in the world. And we're number 10 in the world in the Human Freedom Index, and most importantly, we are, according to Freedom House, number 1. Well, I'll put it differently. The United States is number 2, and Germany is number 3 in internet freedom. So we're not doing badly. So the question is how to get here and why you should get here. How we got here, there were all kinds of things that we did to get to where we are, but one thing to keep in mind, and why I'm talking about Estonian electronics and IT, is that it's the one thing that allows you to get over size or lack of size. How I came to this conclusion, and why you should come to this conclusion as well, if you want to come to the Baltic states, where you say, oh, it's so small, there's nothing to, how can I do anything in a place that's so small? Well, you should think about how liberating the past 20 years have been for people all over the world when it comes to the possibilities of IT. Estonia is a very, very small place, yet it is the place that invented Kazaa, though you may be too young to know what that is, but it was the first file swapping program for which the inventors almost went to jail, but then they didn't go to jail, and then they invented the next thing, which is Skype, whose research and development headquarters is just about 200 meters from here to this day. It's here because you can do things in an IT world even though you don't have this advantage of size. 20 years ago, everyone was talking about economies of scale, how you need to have big things in order to succeed. 20 years later, they're saying that they're no longer saying things have to be big to succeed. They just say they're too big to fail. But here in Estonia, we've been successful precisely, I think, because we're small, because it forced us to really develop the technology of the future and the world of the future. My own sort of thinking on this came from reading a rather Luddite neo-Marxist book in the early 90s by Jeremy Rifkin called The End of Work, in which his book's argument was that the more IT we have, the more machines we have, the fewer jobs there will be. And so, hence the title of the book, The End of Work. And one example he brought in this book was that there was a steel plant in the United States in Kentucky that produced X million tons of steel a year, and they had 12,000 employees. Then the steel company was bought by the Japanese, and then they fixed up the steel plant, and then they still produced X million tons of steel a year, but instead of having 12,000 employees doing it, they had 120. Now, for Jeremy Rifkin, the argument was that, well, look how bad this is. As an Estonian, and all Estonians have this historical angst about there are too few of us. There just aren't enough. I said, this is great. This is exactly what we need. We need to computerize and automatize everything, because this way our functional size will be much greater. We don't have to say, oh, we're just a little country and we're just the size of half of Copenhagen. We can say, look, it doesn't matter. Size no longer matters. And we can produce a Skype, and we can produce all kinds of things. Well, that was the beginning of the idea. And I and a few others, and the then and current Minister of Education, pushed through a thing to bring computers to schools so that kids could learn how to use computers. Now, 15, 20 years after that, you begin to see the effects, as you always do with educational reforms, that some 15 to 20 years afterwards, after the introduction and having all schools online basically by 1996, 97, we are now known as the startup capital of Europe. That's how Forbes rates us. There was a VC magazine had an interview with the leading venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, and he said, well, do you ever go to Europe? He said, no, there's nothing really in Europe. Well, maybe there's the UK, and then there's this very, very strange place called Estonia. And in fact, we do have more startups per capita than any other place in Europe. And even though we have only 1.3 million people, when last year there was a competition of the best startups in the country, in Europe, I think 6 of the top 30 were Estonian, and 2 of the top 3, that is number 1 and number 2, number 1 and number 3, were Estonian startups. Which means that there must be something going on here that's being done right. I won't go into, someone else perhaps can talk about what we are doing that's right, but the reason why I think this place should be interesting to you is not that we have a lot of geeks here, but rather this is the place that has developed more applications for, say, governance than any other place in the world. That's why I had all these things in the EU. And it's also why I know it's done more than any other place, because I've managed to compare. And when you start thinking about the future, where Estonia is today at the forefront and where the world is going is that everything will end up computerized. I headed the e-health task force. Basically, medicine is going to change completely over the next several years. The whole doctor-patient relationship is going to change. Healthcare will be completely different in the next 15, 20 years. If you think about careers in areas such as law, I would say, the sure winner for anyone doing something, if I were doing a business, I would set up a law company, a law firm, and hire people who have both a law and an IT background, because everything from patent law to copyright law to privacy, this is going to be a huge field. And the issues are being confronted here before they're being confronted anywhere else. This is the place to, if you want to see where the future is going, you can find it here. You can find it in the processes that here are already in operation. And maybe someday, maybe hopefully in the next 10, 15 years, you will see the same things in the rest of Europe. So I would encourage you, if you want to get into the oil business, don't come to Estonia. It's just not really happening here. No. But if you wanted to do something that really represents the future, the way things are going to be done everywhere, depending on the rate of development elsewhere, but this is the place to find out where it's going, where it's going to be. And personally, especially I say this to the Estonians in the audience, you don't know how good you have it. This is why I encourage young Estonians to go study abroad, because then they come back and they realize how good they have it. Because you can't do anything online elsewhere. And so, come to Estonia. Estonians, go abroad, find out what it's like. Believe me, you will become disenchanted. And then you'll come here, at least in the summers. Thank you very much.